Women Lead is brought to you in part by the Florida Lottery's Bright Future Scholarship.
Women lead with passion, they commit to succeed. No more shadows in the night, they're shining oh so bright. Strong women bringing change guaranteed. Women lead, women lead.
Welcome to Women Lead, a production of the Women of Color Empowerment Institute. We are your host. I'm Bernadette Norris Weeks.
I am Michelle Austin Pammies.
And I'm Kathy Eggleston. We have a special show for you today with Dr. Marvin Dunn. He is a native Floridian, a professor emeritus, and retired chairman of the Department of Psychology at Florida International University. Born during the Jim Crow era, he brings a perspective to Black history that has been missed, distorted, and minimalized in the past.
He has co-authored several books and appears regularly on local and national television broadcasts, providing insight on race issues in America. He has been published in major newspapers, and he's a nationally respected scholar, author, historian, and community activist in race and ethnic relations. He lives in Miami, Florida.
Dr. Dunn appeared at our last Women of Color Empowerment Conference, speaking on issues of social justice in America. He spoke about the importance of Black women in the social justice movement. But first, let's hear from Dr. Dunn on how he became a historian and his current projects. Here's a short clip of Dr. Dunn speaking with our very own Atlanta chapter president, Terry Crook.
When I entered academic life in 1972, I was interested more in psychology. But a race riot happened in Miami in 1980, and a lot of people died. And I wanted to know how did this happen? What led to it? And where can we go from here? And that led me into studying the history of Miami, the Black history of Miami, and then Florida and beyond that. But it was that race riot that got me interested in history.
Okay, all right. Back in the 70s. 1980. I know I usually lie about my age, but I have to tell the truth. I was around during that time. All right. Okay, so just share with the audience just a little bit about some of the things that they may not know that you have captured and researched and put out there.
I've been to almost every place in Florida where there has been a major lynching. I own property in Rosewood. I'm the only Black person today who owns property in Rosewood. But as I traveled around the state researching these lynchings, I became very much aware of the fact that Florida has a very, very violent history. People don't know that. People think Florida started with Disney. But before that, Florida's history was terrible in terms of lynching. Your chances of being lynched in Florida during the lynching era was greater than your chances of being lynched in Mississippi if you're a Black person. So that kind of history has challenged me. I've gone to many cemeteries, graveyards, talked to folks who were relatives of people who were lynched, talked to folks who were relatives of folks who lynched people, to develop an understanding of how this violence could have happened and what we can do going forward to not have it happen again.
So what are some of the projects that you're working on right now that we would like to share with our audience?
I'm so glad you asked me that. I just put up a webpage, dunnhistory.com.
Okay.
A lot of my work is there. A lot of the things we talked about at this conference this morning are on that page. So go to dunnhistory.com and you'll see a lot of the material that I'm interested in having people understand. Beyond that, I'm still researching and writing in lynching and anti-Black violence, still moving around Florida, trying to gain more perspective, and also social justice for folks who were lynched. A lot of people who were lynched, we don't even know where they're buried. So one of the things I'm trying to do now is deal with abandoned Black cemeteries in Florida so that we can identify these folks and give the proper respect to those who've been killed and forgotten.
We'll be right back with more Dr. Marvin Dunn after these messages.
Your ticket from the Florida Lottery isn't just a ticket, it's your ticket. With over 1 billion winners and counting across the state, it's your ticket to fun and excitement. It's also your ticket to support local retailers right in your community. And with billions of dollars contributed to Florida students and schools, your ticket is their ticket to a brighter future. So no matter how you play, your ticket goes much further than you think.
At the Women of Color Empowerment Institute, our mission is to enhance and expand leadership by women of color. We do this in a variety of different ways, including but not limited to providing mentorship opportunities for young professionals where we assist in helping to create paths to leadership. We empower women to develop capacities for social change. We produce programs that promote heritage awareness, and we provide training opportunities for business and government. Our institute holds seminars focused on professional success techniques, and we host many other events such as our popular Advocates for Change and Leaders Connect. The Women of Color Empowerment Institute publishes a magazine called Women Lead. Our signature event is the Women of Color Empowerment Conference, a yearly conference where hundreds of leaders gather from all across the United States and beyond. To learn more about membership and how you can support our programs or be a sponsor of the Women Lead TV, visit us at nationalwomenofcolor.com. Again, that's nationalwomenofcolor.com.
The law office of Austin, Pammies, Norris, Weeks, Powell is a full-service law firm practicing in the area of governmental law, including the representation of municipalities, civil litigation, personal injury, real estate, and corporate transactional matters. With over 100 years of collective experience, our attorneys are admitted to practice before state courts, federal courts, and the United States Supreme Court. We are conveniently located in downtown Fort Lauderdale and can be reached at 954-768-9770. Or for more information about the law firm of Austin, Pammies, Norris, Weeks, Powell, visit our website at apnwlaw.com. That's apnwlaw.com.
Welcome back to Women Lead. We are continuing with Dr. Marvin Dunn, historian at the Women of Color Empowerment Conference on Social Justice.
Some of the information that Dr. Dunn spoke about was just, eye-opening. For instance, think about the closeness of the relationship between Mary McLeod Bethune and Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yes, and also what happened and what this relationship brought about for America. A lot of the ideas that we have about President Roosevelt really being ahead of his times with respect to social justice
Like the
issues,
New Deal issues.
yes, etc. A lot of these things came from Mary McLeod Bethune whispering to Eleanor Roosevelt, who then whispered to the president.
Absolutely.
Well, ladies, of course, when you need to get a job done, ask a woman.
And ask a woman of color.
Even better.
Even better. One of the things that I loved about Dr. Dunn's presentation was that it was so conversational feeling and behind the scenes. He really is an extraordinary presenter, and it's so important that we learn this history, but he presented it in such an entertaining way.
He really did, and I loved the discussion about Sojourner Truth, the pictures that he showed, which are little known, photographs that he was able to bring to us. And I love the fact that he talked about how she was one of the first, I think, the first Black person to dine at the White House when she dined with President Lincoln.
Which I did not know.
And it's interesting. It's true that we have recently had the first Black president of this country, but apparently, based on what Dr. Dunn has told us, we have been officially visiting the White House since the time of Abraham Lincoln.
Exactly. And can you imagine, she said to Abraham Lincoln, I never heard of you before you were president.
Which was great to know. Well, Dr. Dunn really did an extraordinary kickoff to our Women of Color Empowerment Social Justice Conference. Let's take a look.
It's not wisdom that you get with age, it's perspective. I wanted to get an image of Sojourner Truth when she was a young woman, but she was never young. She was born like that. She was 6 feet tall. She was known to be very forceful in her speech. She was not a submissive woman. In 1864, shortly before Lincoln was killed, he entertained or accepted Sojourner Truth at the White House. And Lincoln's biographer wrote down what happened between the two of them. Sojourner Truth told Lincoln, before you became president, I never heard of you. And he told her, Madam, I've heard a lot about you before this day. The thing that I appreciate so much about her, among other things, is that she spoke truth to power. When Lincoln allowed her to come to the White House, that was unusual, not just because she was a former slave, but because she was a woman. And after he accepted her, allowed her to come to the White House, no other president accepted a black person into the White House until Roosevelt did it. Teddy Roosevelt allowed Booker T. Washington to have lunch with him in the White House. That was the first time since Sojourner Truth was in the White House that happened. The next time after that a black person ate in the White House was Bethune. Mary McLeod Bethune was invited to the White House by Eleanor Roosevelt. So this is unusual, that Lincoln would allow this photograph to be taken. Oh yes, one of my favorites. Ida B. Wells, born in 1862, died in 1931. She was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi. And this woman, after she became a journalist, and she was also one of the founders of the NAACP. But she wrote profusely. She was a writer in Memphis. And she took on two main things. The first thing that she took on was lynching. She confronted lynching, and she confronted the hypocrisy of lynching, and she confronted the perverse sexuality that undermined that kind of violence. Can you imagine someone in her day and age confronting the Klan, confronting politicians, confronting the system? She was a loving person. She took on great challenges. And for the most part, she won her place in history. For the most part, I think unscathed, but we'll never know what she suffered as a result of her bravery and the courage that she showed. That's Mary McLeod Bethune as a young woman. Isn't she gorgeous? I found that picture years ago. Some of you may have seen it, but I had never seen a photograph of Mary McLeod Bethune as a young woman. She was born in Maysville, South Carolina, one of 11 children. My grandmother, I was raised in DeLand, about 40 miles from Daytona, where Bethune founded Bethune-Cookman College. My grandmother called her Mother Bethune and spoke of her with such. My grandmother didn't really like a lot of people. I think there were about 6 I can name other than her grandchildren. But she loved this woman, and she spoke of her with such and she should have. Started out as a teacher, eventually, next slide please, went to Daytona and founded Bethune-Cookman College. This is an early photograph of women at Bethune-Cookman College. Bethune embraced Booker T. Washington's education philosophy. You train black people to do what they can do with what they have at the moment. So at Bethune-Cookman College, she was training these girls to be housekeepers. And of course, the college evolved beyond that to be the great institution that we know it to be today. When the suffragette movement began, white suffragettes were not interested in having you all know this, having black suffragettes with them. They thought that white women would have a better chance of getting the vote if black women were not marching with them, because white men would be even more opposed to women getting the vote if black and white women were seen together marching for the vote. So black women, with the leadership of people like Bethune, did their own thing towards getting black women registered to vote. It bears pause for a moment. It was bad enough for white men in the South that white women were going to get the vote. But the idea of black women voting was a tremendous threat. So there was tremendous opposition to women voting, but particularly to black women voting. And so Bethune became a force. She went around the country, but particularly in Florida, organizing black women for political activism, and was very successful. She and Eleanor were buddies. It's the photograph of Bethune entering the White House. Roosevelt was not a liberal. His wife was. Roosevelt could have let things stay just as they were. It was Eleanor and Bethune. that pushed the president towards, for example, allowing the Tuskegee Airmen to be a thing of a reality, to start moving the federal government towards integration to some degree. So when I say these women moved the needle, Bethune moved the needle, often behind the scenes. I can just imagine that kind of teamwork today if we had that kind of combination working towards social issues today, which we don't. I interviewed a woman named Bernice Sawyer. Her family owned the Mary Elizabeth Hotel in Colortown, back during the heyday of Colortown. She said Mary Bethune would come to the hotel. She had a drugstore in the Mary Elizabeth Hotel. Her son ran it. So Bethune came often to Miami, stayed at the Mary Elizabeth Hotel. Bernice Sawyer told me that when Mrs. Bethune walked into a room of men, she stopped and said, "Gentlemen, stand up. Don't you see a lady in your presence?" Bethune was like that. She was that kind of a force. I've just heard stories about her over the years that remind me of her power, not just from the respect that she got from my grandmother, but from around the world for the work that she did. I met this woman once. I was in the 11th grade, 1954, in DeLand, and the principal said, "Some of y'all are going to go over to Bethune-Cookman to meet Miss Bethune." And I didn't want to go. I had a girlfriend. We had plans. I said, "No, Marvin, get on the bus. You're going to go." And so I went. And I'm so glad she died a few months later. But my impression of her, two things she said: never forget that you're black and where you came from. And then she said, read. Read. I was 14 years old. My impression of her, she was the blackest woman I've ever seen in my life, but totally, totally captivating and beautiful. We know what Rosa Parks did, but not many of us know what Irene Morgan did before Rosa took that famous ride. In 1946, Irene Morgan challenged the rule that black people had to sit in the back of the bus. 1946. And she challenged that. It went to court, and she won. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that it is against interstate commerce to enforce segregation. The court didn't say that it was unconstitutional. They said it violates interstate commerce. So if a person, for example, in Irene Morgan's day, was on a bus in Maryland, and you went to Virginia, when the bus crossed the state line, you have to move. And that's stupid. The court saw that. But notice how the court avoided the constitutional question, which would have to come later. You all know who that is? That is Patricia Stevens Dew. Pat Dew led the civil rights movement in Tallahassee when she was a student at FAMU. She gravitated into the movement. Reverend C.K. Steele was the pastor in Tallahassee who started the movement back in the late 1950s. And Pat Dew became the person most readily available to him at that time in that city. When she was leading a demonstration, a white police officer, threw acid in her face. So all of her life, Pat always wore sunglasses, even in the movie theater. Who is that? Fannie Lou Hamer. Never heard of her? Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. She goes to the 1968 convention and says, we're going to sit, these black folks, we're going to sit in this convention, even though the Mississippi Democratic Party excluded us from voting. Next slide, please. You didn't mess with her. I just love her. If you ever hear her voice, it's captivating.
And Dr. Dunn also talked about Ida B. Wells, who we know as being a wonderful investigative reporter. I did not know her role in really uncovering the lynchings and chronicling them of that time. Well, we are going to learn much more from Dr. Dunn's presentation after these messages.
Your ticket from the Florida Lottery isn't just a ticket, it's your ticket. With over 1 billion winners and counting across the state, it's your ticket to fun and excitement. It's also your ticket to support local retailers right in your community. And with billions of dollars contributed to Florida students and schools, your ticket is their ticket to a brighter future. So no matter how you play, your ticket goes much further than you think.
At the Women of Color Empowerment Institute, our mission is to enhance and expand leadership by women of color. We do this in a variety of different ways, including but not limited to providing mentorship opportunities for young professionals where we assist in helping to create paths to leadership. We empower women to develop capacities for social change. We produce programs that promote heritage awareness, and we provide training opportunities for business and government. Our institute holds seminars focused on professional success techniques, and we host many other events such as our popular Advocates for Change and Leaders Connect. The Women of Color Empowerment Institute publishes a magazine called Women Lead. Our signature event is the Women of Color Empowerment Conference, a yearly conference where hundreds of leaders gather from all across the United States and beyond. To learn more about membership and how you can support our programs or be a sponsor of the Women Lead TV, visit us at nationalwomenofcolor.com. Again, that's nationalwomenofcolor.com.
The law office of Austin, Pammies, Norris, Weeks, Powell is a full-service law firm practicing in the area of governmental law, including the representation of municipalities, civil litigation, personal injury, real estate, and corporate transactional matters. With over 100 years of collective experience, our attorneys are admitted to practice before state courts, federal courts, and the United States Supreme Court. We are conveniently located in downtown Fort Lauderdale and can be reached at 954-768-9770. Or for more information about the law firm of Austin, Pammies, Norris, Weeks, Powell, visit our website at apnwlaw.com. That's apnwlaw.com.
Dr. Dunn was tremendous at the conference. What's interesting is Dr. Dunn basically telling us a story about why people did not run away during times of slavery. And of course, when we were all young, I'm sure we said all of the things about what we would do if we were enslaved and how we would run away. But there were very complicated issues surrounding running away.
What are the basic ones being running away to what? Because it's not as if there was an infrastructure in place that you can run away and then find a job and feed your family.
Exactly.
You ran away, you had to be going somewhere where you could provide for yourself and your family. That structure was not there at that time.
And people thought it was dangerous, I'm sure.
Well, and it was. And back to that family issue, families already were so compromised. It was very difficult to consider that for yourself and potentially for your family members who may be on other plantations far away.
That's true.
And even if you were all together, right, by running away, you may be separated. And so you were lucky to be together if you were, and you kind of stayed there until.
And that's the kind of stuff that really, as he said, supported these institutions of slavery, unfortunately.
Well, the human toll, the realistic human toll of the enslavement.
Let's hear more from Dr. Dunn on this issue.
Harriet Tubman ran 13 missions to deliver slaves. 70 people, at least 70 enslaved people, were saved by her. I wondered, over the years I've studied slavery and racism and all of that, why didn't more slaves run away when Harriet came, or when Sojourner Truth came? Why didn't more of them run away? Even when the Civil War ended, and the white men were, during the Civil War rather, when the white men were away fighting the war, the slaves still didn't run. Why was that? I've heard folks say, well, if I had been a slave, I would have run. No, you wouldn't have. No, you don't say that. If you'd run, 30-year-old man, 25-year-old man, who's going to cut the wood for your mama for the winter? Who's going to feed your children? So running was not always an easy decision to make. Plus, it was dangerous. I want you to look at this image, though, because it shows the Underground Railroad, the southern route. Very few folks realize that the Underground Railroad ran both ways. Why would a slave who's running away in Georgia go to Canada, go to Ohio, rather than coming into Florida? Because Florida was a wilderness. The ones that ran south came all the way to Biscayne Bay. Many of them got boats to the Bahamas, helped by Bahamian fishermen often. Harriet Tubman fell in love with another slave. It's 1815. His master wouldn't allow them to be together, so she ran in 1815. You know, one quote from her that I didn't realize until recently, she said, "I didn't run away," quote. "I walked away," quote. "I did not run away. I walked away by daylight." The kind of a person that she was. Next slide, please. They called her the General because she would absolutely shoot you if you didn't stay with the program. When slaves ran away, once you left, you had to stay with it. She couldn't take the chance of you stopping, getting off the trail, and telling somebody what was going on. So it took that kind of leadership from someone who'd been through the kinds of things that she went through to appreciate how important it was to stay with what she was trying to accomplish.
The historical perspective provided to us by Dr. Dunn educates us not just about the history, but makes us understand where we stand in America today and what we need to do to move forward into the future.
If you examine the great leaps forward that we've made as a society, an American society, every one of them, in my opinion, was to some degree moved by women, organized women. We recognize this in these years, but should have recognized it when it was happening. It was the organizational capacity and commitment and passion of the women we've talked about today and others, including in this room, who have made the difference. So, what will you do to move the needle? What have you done to move the needle? What have you done to make sure that people know that they don't mess with you? That's the ultimate mark. What have you done that it lets people know that you were a force, you made a difference, you risked something other than your job to get the results that you know we need?
Thank you, Dr. Dunn.
This has been a great show. We really enjoyed our time with you today. And until the next time,
Be empowered.